Hi, I'm Maggie Alfonsi, former England rugby player and now a MasterCard ambassador. MasterCard is proud to sponsor the Telegraph Women's Sport podcast hosted by Dame Laura Kenny. MasterCard has championed women's sport for over 25 years. Discover more at mastercard.co.uk/impact.
Welcome back to the brand new series of the Telegraph Women's Sport podcast. I'm Laura Kenny and I'm thrilled to be your host for Series 2 of the podcast. So building on the insightful conversations we had in Series 1, we're going to continue to explore the important issues and inspiring stories within women's sport. Although we've seen incredible growth in women's sport over the last few years and much needed conversations around equality in sport are starting to take place in the mainstream, there's still work to be done, and we're not shying away from tough conversations that need to happen. So join us for engaging discussions that celebrate women's sport and empower you to make an impact in your own sporting journey. To kick things off, we're diving into the essence of success in sports and uncovering the role inspiration plays in people's sporting journeys. We'll be exploring what makes a sporting figure inspirational, unpacking recent record-breaking performances and discussing the impact of inspirational role models on the next generation of female athletes. So to better understand the brilliance that goes on behind being an inspiration, I'm joined by three fabulous sportswomen who can teach us a thing or two about inspiration. Joining me today, we have Carla Ward, a former midfielder and now top football manager who recently stepped down as Aston Villa manager in the WSL last season. World Rugby Hall of Fame member who organised the very first Women's Rugby World Cup, Sue Dorrington, and a multi-record attempting rower, Zara Lachlan, a 21-year-old university student who is setting out to be the first woman and the youngest ever person to row 3,600 nautical miles solo and unsupported across the Atlantic. So for me, as a bike rider, over the years, it's really changed. I guess women's sport now has grown so much, but when I first started, really Sir Chris Hoy was my role model, who obviously isn't a female bike rider. And there was one female bike rider who I could inspire to be like, and that was Victoria Pendleton. And she's spoken so honestly and openly about, her struggles and her time within the sport. And it just, to me, is so different. It's almost a world that doesn't really resonate with me anymore because it has grown so much. And also my inspiration, I guess, also came from Kelly Holmes because the Olympics is put on such a grand stage, and it's the only time back then in 2004 when she competed in Athens that I really felt women's sport really got shone a light on, and it was the only time that a mass amount of people actually watched women in sport. And so for me, I guess that's really my first Olympic memory, to be honest. And there is actually a statistic now that says 88% of people agree that watching females inspire the younger generation to take part in sport and then stay in sport. And so back then, you can imagine how many people, I guess, dropped out of sport because we didn't have those role models. So that's where I'm going to bring you guys in. And I want to go back to what your inspirations were and what got you into sport. And why, I guess, you carried on and why it's been so important for you to stay involved in sport. So I'll come to Carla first. Obviously, you were a player to start with and then stepped onto the coaching side of things. And I guess for me, it's, just talking about why you decided to go that route and who have been your inspirations in your career.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you're right. There isn't, up until now, I don't think, young girls really, particularly when I was younger, and that's showing my age now, I'm a lot older. So I think, look, growing up, I didn't really have female role models. It was always male role models. And I got into football through, I grew up on a council estate, and that was all you could do is basically go with the boys and put some jumpers to goalpost down and create your own games. So, and obviously there was no girls football teams around. We had to knock on the door of the school teachers to try and make that happen. And I somehow got myself in the team, boys team, against all odds. But yeah, I think growing up, it was always male. Stephen Gerrard was one, and he still is, even though now I would class him as someone like I can lean on, but I think he was somebody. But I think now we have an opportunity where my daughter's 5 now, and I think she's got some unbelievable role models out there in all sports, by the way, because I have no idea what sport she's going to go down. But yeah, I think it's important now that we really showcase the female quality we have in all sports, because we now have a chance for the next generation to find inspiration.
And, you know, you said about, you know, you were part of a football team. Was that the same age group? Because there's rules now, isn't there, around, because females can take part in a younger age group, can't they, of the male team?
Yeah, yes and no. So it was at school actually, and there was no girls teams. There was no girls teams outside of school, and there was none inside of school. And I asked Mr. Matthews, who was the head of PE, lovely guy, whether I could join, whether I could basically train or trial for the boys team. And not only did I manage to get in the team, but he gave me the captain's armband, which didn't go down well with the boys, of course. But yeah, so no, I was, you know, that person that was willing to go and play with the boys. But it wasn't until I went into year 7, which was 11 years old, that we went to the head teacher and said, look, why can't we have a girls football team? And we managed to get 4 or 5 girls together, but there was nothing until I think maybe I was 12 or 13, and we had Torquay United, Torbay Girls, as we called ourselves at the time. And we then it started to, when I say grow, it was very small. Yeah. But we did manage to create a league down there, albeit not too many. But yeah, it's changing now, isn't it? I think if you're a 13-year-old, could you play in the under-11s boys? I believe so. But I think the cut-off used to be 14 to play with the boys, but I think might be 12 now. It certainly should be with the way that the game's gone.
Yeah. I mean, to me now, like, because my best friend, she was really into football. I mean, I wasn't at all, but she absolutely loved it. And there was just nowhere, like you say, there was nowhere for her to play. And so just to even see, there's a couple of girls teams actually in my little boys. So he's 7 in his league. And it's just brilliant, like, to see that that's even an option for them, because I just feel like my friend could have been really good, but there wasn't the opportunity, like the amount of lost talent that I feel like we've lost just through not having the kind of, the leagues, or even, you know, someone like yourself putting your hand up and saying, well, hang on a minute, I'll set this thing up. Like, there wasn't that at the time. And then if we can just touch on your relationship with Emma Hayes, obviously she's a huge inspiration to anyone in the coaching world. I mean, my sister, she's a bike riding coach, and I mean, she looks up to Emma Hayes as this absolutely fantastic, inspirational person. And you've been so lucky to actually work alongside her. So what is she like to work with? Do you see her as an inspiration?
Yeah, look, I think when I went into the WSL, I was a little bit fish out of water, and I remember our second game was against Chelsea, and you realise very quickly you're up against the best in the world, both players and staff. So I went and introduced myself and had a conversation, and that conversation was quite funny actually, because where it probably should have been 2 minutes, it ended up an hour before the game of us talking, and she said, which she's lived to regret, I'm sure, anything you need, let me know. So me being me, particularly in that first year, I had a lot of questions, I needed a lot of direction. And she helped me and she guided me, certainly through my first year in professional football, well, the WSL. So yeah, she was great for me. We went through an awful lot in that first year at Birmingham, and she was great, and then guided me since. And then obviously I had the break. We had similar reasons for stepping away from the WSL in the summer, which I think we've both been quite vocal about in terms of the league and both having kids the same age and not being able to have that relationship with our kids, and then also the pressures and the lack of support within the division. So when we did step away, I went on holiday, and I'll be honest, I was sat with a cocktail on the beach in Dubai, and she called me, and said, "Do I want to go and be part of the staff for the Olympics?" And it's not often you get those phone calls. And look, my first response was, "If you need me, I'll be there." She's been there for me for 5-6 years where she's guided me. So the least I could do was get on a plane and go and enjoy myself at the Olympics. So off we went, and unbelievable experience. I think she proved and showed me, because it was different, right? So I had a relationship with her, like a big sister mentor type relationship, but actually going and being around and that day-to-day contact and seeing how she works was very different. And you always know that you believe that she's the best in the world, but then actually working with her and seeing that day to day really cemented why I believed she was the best in the world. And she has an aura around her and a leadership way that, you know, she speaks, people follow, first and foremost, but she has an air of calm belief. And yeah, it was fascinating, because going into the tournament, being really honest, did I believe that the US could win it? Given the last few years, no. Did I believe they had a better chance with Emma? Yes. But after the first week, I thought, no doubt in my mind that we could go on and do it and win gold. And I think Emma and her staff, because she has got some unbelievable staff that she's brought across from Chelsea that are just top of, they're a level above. So what she achieved, it makes you realise, seeing it day to day, that you're right, she's the best in the world.
And I mean, that helps, doesn't it? Obviously, so my inspiration, I guess, as a coach, or a leader, I should say, was actually Dave Brailsford. So although not a woman, obviously, but he was the success story behind British cycling. Like, he was just an unbelievable leader. And I really believed everything, I guess, that came out of that man's mouth. Like, I was just fully committed to... When someone sells you a plan and you go, you know what, I'm totally on board with this, you do 100% commit to it. And so I guess that is what Emma 100%. Is to that team. Like, she managed to inspire that team to believe that they were the best.
Yeah, and I think it was a harder job than people realised, because she's going into somewhere that was partially broken, I think it's fair to say, right? So they were going through they've not had a great period. You know, there's been some unrest. So she was going in, and I know she's Emma Hayes, but there's still work to do to show that this is what I can do to help us achieve our goal. But the way in which she delivers that message is unbelievable.
And so, just coming to you, Zara, I mean, you are unbelievable, and your ideas are absolutely crazy, if I've got to be honest. I mean, you only started rowing when you were 16, and now 21. What, I guess, initiated the passion for rowing?
I used to be into cycling as well.
Oh,
and
did
then
you?
I went to a boarding sixth one. Yeah, but BMX racing, so not your kind.
Okay. Very different. Okay, that shows your personality compared to mine.
And I went to sixth form, and I didn't want to lose my leg muscle, but I couldn't train to go and ride my bike. So I started rowing, thinking I'd always go back to racing, and I never did, because I was quite good at rowing. And then the first time I got in an ocean rowing boat was in August, and it's now October, and I leave for Portugal on Sunday. So they've done a very good rash program to make sure that I'm actually properly trained in the 2 months I've had on the water.
That is mental. So August this year, and you set off in how long?
The departure window is from the 26th of October.
Wow. I mean, that is crazy. And just, I guess, talk me through, like, your inspiration into what has made you take on such a huge challenge.
So I'm 21, and so I think I've had quite a lot of female role models in my life in sport. And I remember one of the first people that I had was at the 2012 Olympics, and it was Jessica Ennis-Hill. And I just remember watching her and thinking, oh my God, she's amazing. She's so strong and she's so good at everything. And I actually did start pole vaulting a few years later, and I was always a runner. I didn't like the throwing that much, but just seeing somebody work so hard, I think she was probably the first person that I looked at like that. And then in the army, you meet a lot of people who have done amazing things and who I looked up to, probably from the age of like 15 or 14 when I started meeting them. And I think lots of army women as well have inspired me.
And your family as well. I mean, what do they think about this challenge? Because, I mean, it's a long time and it's pretty scary, right? Like, I mean, maybe you don't find it scary, but written on paper, it seems like you could come against some pretty scary things over the next few months.
Yeah, no, it definitely is scary, but I feel like if you're not a little bit apprehensive about it, you've not understood the scale of the challenge that you're doing. There's a reason that it is setting so many records, because it is difficult and it is big, and sometimes quite overwhelming as well. But my family have been very supportive. They are terrified, but they know that I'm trained as much as I can be, and they keep saying how they're really looking forward to the end. So so we're making plans to have lunch in like February when I'm back, which is fine.
So just briefly, I guess, just go over what this challenge is that you're taking on, like, because you are totally unsupported. You're going to be out there on your own. So just tell us the scale of what this is that you're going to take on.
Okay, so I am rowing solo and unsupported from mainland Europe to mainland South America this winter, and minimum rowing 15 hours a day, and expected to take me just under 90 days.
Wow. And you have breaks to sleep, don't you? Like minimal breaks to sleep.
Yeah, in 20 minutes, yeah.
That is mental. And like unsupported means
20 minutes, sorry, 20 minutes sleep.
Yeah.
That's not a sleep, is it? That's borderline not even a nap.
No, I couldn't cope with that. No.
And so food and water. What's food and water? How are we getting this?
So I make all of the water from the seawater around me, and it's charged with solar panels on my boat. And then I carry all of my food, and it's just dehydrated. It's freeze dried, and you've got to put water in it.
Okay.
And then leave it for like an hour, and then it congeals, and you eat it.
So like an astronaut, because they have the little flat pack things, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that honestly, I'm inspired by you, although I would never take on any open water situation at all. So yeah, I mean, hats off to you. I mean, my family would be absolutely terrified. Did you have to convince them, or were they totally like, okay, if you're on board with this?
They didn't really have much of a say.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
It was quite a last minute program. I only said I wanted to do it in April. I got all of the funding cleared by the beginning of July, and I got the boat at the beginning of August. And so I did tell my mother, and she did cry, and she did beg for me to at least go with somebody.
Yeah.
And it was really difficult to find a partner who wanted to be, one was free for 5 consecutive months, and 2 who actually wanted to. So I actually didn't find anybody who fit those categories. So
did your mum not fancy you? Your mum could have gone with you.
No, funny enough, no.
Oh, right. And Sue, to bring you into our discussion here, and we were having a little sneaky chat off air.
We were.
And you are an absolutely fascinating person, and I want you to go back, and you're going to cry, I reckon, because just seeing a small snippet of earlier.
Middle-aged woman definitely will cry.
Take us right back to the start of your journey,
beginning.
because you've seen it all. Like, you've been there, you've been through it all. And we were talking, weren't we, about Twickenham last year, England versus France. And I was actually there in the record breaker audience, but it wasn't always like that, was it?
It wasn't, Laura. And thank you so much for acknowledging women's rugby. We have a really tough history, and we've come a long way. So I was 23 years old, and I had never seen rugby before, ever. Yeah. So I didn't have any role models. But what I was is that I was sporty and I was strong. But I didn't know what to do with a 5'1" strong body. I had no idea. And then I met some rugby people, and they said, right, there's going to be a women's team. Why don't you come down to training and, see if you get on? And I never looked back, Laura. It was just, I had found my tribe. I had finally found something that I could do, and that I was good at. Yeah. I had rowed hunters and jumpers. I'd done all sorts of things, but I'd never played a team sport, and I loved getting into a team sport and being part of a community. And women's rugby is definitely a community. So what I wanted to do, being very competitive, what I wanted to do was get better fast. And I thought, right, where shall I go? And so I thought, the UK. I'll go to England and I'll get better fast and come home and be a superstar. Well, that didn't work out because I never left.
Okay.
Absolutely fell in love with England, the UK. And but what I found is that I had left a more organized structure behind me in women's rugby than I found in front of me. So if we're talking about role models, I didn't have any role models. We were the beginning. So we were the first, club sides, the first international sides in the UK. And so I came over, started playing. I couldn't find a women's team. So I started training with the London Cornish men. And in Hyde Park,
And they were like, oh, some of these guys would knock me a little bit harder, and some of them would say, yeah. But so I spent some time with the London Cornish men, and then one day I was running in Hyde Park, and I ran across two women who had a rugby ball, and I ran up to them and said, who are you? Let me. And it was the Imperial College women's rugby team.
Okay.
And that's where my journey started. So from Imperial, I went to Finchley. It was the first ever women's rugby club in the country. And then we had the first GB International at Richmond Rugby Club. And Richmond said to us, why don't you all come here? And it was like, paradise. Richmond was this amazing club. And we had been used to sort of, we had to do everything at Finchley. We had to clean the baths. We had to bake our baked potatoes. It was just chaos.
Okay.
And we came to Richmond and we set up the Richmond Women's Rugby Club. Now, the Richmond Women's Rugby Club was the largest, most successful women's team in the world for over a decade.
Yeah.
So that's where my journey started, sort of in the Twin Cities, and then came over here to get better and never left.
And what was your motivation? Because you did, like you're saying, you didn't have any inspirations to look up to. So what was your motivation with, thinking and feeling that women should have a World Cup and initiating that?
Well, the thing is that Richmond women had gone to New Zealand to play. We were the first UK team to go over to New Zealand and play. Played 9, won 9. And we had got wind that there was going to be a World Cup. Now, back then, we're talking, the 80s, early 80s, there was no investment in women's sport. And we were all self-funding. And we knew that if there's going to be a World Cup, that it wouldn't be brilliantly well attended, because women, we couldn't afford to get teams there. So we said to ourselves, right, we're going to hold a World Cup. Let's hold it in England. Yeah. Because the point is that, a lot of the teams were European. We had been playing Great Britain and England at that point. We've been playing, Sweden, the Netherlands, France, Spain, Italy. So we decided that we were going to hold the 1991 World Cup. We actually held it in Cardiff.
Okay.
Because that's where they were the most receptive in terms of, supporting us in terms of stadiums and refereeing and helping us with the infrastructure. But I have to say, Laura, we had nothing and we had no one.
Yeah.
It was myself and 3 other women and a wonderful chair by the name of Debs Griffin, who's going to be the first ever president of the RFU, female president of the RFU. And the 4 of us just got on with it. Now, we had jobs.
Yeah.
I was playing for England. I had training. Debs had a baby. Mary had a baby. We all had full-time jobs. It was absolutely amazing. And we created the first ever Women's Rugby World Cup. 12 teams took part, and the USA beat England in the final. And when I looked over and we were singing God Save the Queen and the national anthems, I looked over to the other side and I thought, oh my word, there's women over there that I played with. But when you put an England shirt on, you're England. And I had a 10-year, 12-year career with England going into the 94 World Cup as well.
Honestly, the journey that rugby has come on is just absolutely crazy, isn't it, really? Like, it's just grown so much. And, you've got the statistic, haven't you, on how many people actually watched in Twickenham. How many was it?
Yeah. It was, and to put it into context, Laura, the thing is that we had never had a women's rugby standalone game at Twickenham.
Yeah.
And we played France last year. First ever standalone game, we had 42,000 people in the audience. Now, what you have to understand is that when I was the commercial director of the Women's Rugby World Cup Committee in 91, and my job was investment and money, and I was told one day by a corporate that, Sue, women's rugby is a participation sport. It's not a spectator sport. So when I was sitting in the stands at Twickenham with 42,000 people around me, oh my word, I think I sobbed the whole day. I was just so proud of everyone. And the Red Roses and England, and they're a brand now.
Yeah.
And amazingly like the Lionesses, love the Lionesses, so just love those women. And they're a brand. And the Women's Sports Trust is saying that women's sport now is engaging a much younger audience. Yeah. They can see it, they can be it. And the Red Roses are super fantastic at engaging with their audiences.
Yeah.
And after every game, they go down and they sign autographs and T-shirts and selfies and photographs.
Yeah.
And then we talk to that young audience in the way in which they like. It's TikTok, it's Instagram, it's Reels. And so we're on the move.
Yeah, I mean, I watched, honestly, I thought it was absolutely incredible, and such a nice atmosphere as well down there. It was a really nice place, and my little boy came with me actually, and he absolutely loved it.
Hi, Maggie again. For over a quarter of a century, MasterCard has been a major sponsor of women's football and is proud to partner with Arsenal Women, the most successful English women's football team in history. With 60 trophies and a record 16 women's league titles, Arsenal Women are also the only British winners of the UEFA Women's Champions League. Discover more at mastercard.co.uk/impact.
So 88% of people consider professional women athletes to be impactful role models for young women. So let's just dig into a bit more of that and discuss the impact of sports women being framed more as inspirational in the public eye, and the sense of responsibility, I guess, that they might feel for the future generations. And like, how do we feel that impacts both sports women coming up and the future in the future generations being inspired? Like, for me, I guess stepping out onto an Olympic stage is one thing, and then coming back after you've won and people saying, oh, you've inspired my daughter or my granddaughter to get involved in sport. It did feel like a huge responsibility, because I just went from Laura the bike rider to Laura, I guess, the public figure. And it was something that for me took a little bit of getting used to, because it wasn't a realm that I was in before stepping onto the Olympic stage. And it felt like a huge responsibility, because all of a sudden I was thinking, hang on, like, this really could be on me to help the next generation get into sport and then stay into sport. So what do I want people to see me as? And so for me, it was always, talking openly about absolutely anything that a female athlete could come up against, be it periods, be it talking to male coaches, because we are still in a world where there are a lot more male coaches than there are female. And yeah, I found it quite a lot, I guess, to kind of get used to and kind of change my mindset a little bit on what I was saying and how I was going to encourage these younger girls to get into and stay in sport. So I guess I just want to touch on, I'll start with you, Carla, and, it's a tough world, isn't it, to start and get into football. And now, say, if we look at the Lionesses, for them now, they are in a completely different level of fame, I guess. Do you think that, they have this sense of responsibility for getting females involved in football?
They do. They 100% do. But with that, there needs to become support for those females, because we're talking about, similar to what Sue said about how quickly women's rugby is developed. Women's football is developed at such a rapid rate that some of these players that are now global faces that are now expected to inspire the next generation, and a lot of them do, but there needs to be then a support mechanism around them to help them guide that next generation, because that's been one of the biggest talking points, I would argue, in this last year or so, is how do we give them that support, because they do want to inspire the next generation, but they are inundated constantly and there's a big expectation now. And when we talk about education on how to be, and I think you just said then about you almost have to adapt your terminology, the way you speak, the way you act, the way you conduct yourself on social media. Yes, you do. And because now, like I said, it's going at such a rapid rate, how do we educate them and guide them to be role models? Because it doesn't come naturally to everybody. Some it does, but a lot it doesn't. And then when they don't get it right, it's very difficult, and then they don't want to be that inspiration. And there's a really fine balance, and there's a really big education piece on that around inspiration, and probably something that isn't discussed enough.
Yeah. And then just touching on the fact, obviously, that you're a coach, do you feel like you have a sense of responsibility to, I guess, inspire females who maybe, you know, are ending their career or are actually just thinking, hang on, my personality sort of fits me more as a coaching role than an athlete. Like, do you feel that sense of responsibility, I guess, to inspire them to, you know, because we are, like I said earlier, we are living in a world where male coaches, we do have more than females. Like in the cycling world at the minute, there's way more males than females. So like, do you feel that responsibility because you're one of a minority?
100%, and something I'm working on at the minute, which hopefully we can talk about soon, is programs for young female leaders to be able to step into that world, and how we create a bigger pipeline of female leaders, because ultimately there are some, you know, fascinating potential coaches in this country, but the reality is we're continuing to see an influx of males from abroad. So I think it's down to people like myself and Emma to keep talking about these things, to keep promoting the young females, to potentially try and create programs that allow young females to come through. Because whilst women's sport's in a really good position, it's also in a position where lots of males think it's an easy route to the top. And we have to protect our females coming through, and like I said, be an inspiration for the young females that we can go on and be anything we want to be. But you have to challenge the status quo. You have to be prepared to put your head above the parapet, and you have to make sure that you're prepared to fight for the next generation to come through.
And what about, you know, because obviously you're a mum now as well, and there is very little, I guess, structure, policies, call it what you want, around mums, like just in general, I would say, but especially in terms of the sporting world. I mean, my husband, he works as part of British Cycling, and he said one of the main coaches has just fallen pregnant, and it's like a really grey area to, you know, how you get them back involved, because there isn't really a structure or really support, I would argue, for coaches who want to step away and then come back after they've had a baby.
You're absolutely right. There is no support. There's so FIFA Pro recently announced that there's support in place for players that want to go and have a baby, and I thought that was brilliant, because look, I'm sure you'll agree, it's the best job in the world, right? So, you know, you want to encourage people to be able to go and have that break and you know, create a family. So for coaches, I'll be honest, there isn't anything yet. There needs to be conversations, because I do think that can play a part in potentially young females wanting to take that route, because ultimately to try and get time out in the professional, well, particularly in football and professional football, is very difficult. You know, it's difficult to have a day off. I think in 9 years I've probably had, I don't even know if I've had a day off in the last 9 years. So you don't. And I think that then to say, well, you potentially need a month or 2 months, and that is tough. So, yeah, I would love to see something from the top, from the very top, aka FIFA, UEFA, the FA, somebody to come out and say, we're going to support female coaches.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree. You just want something in place, you know, like policies are useful at times. And Zara, for you, obviously, you are the youngest female about to take on this challenge. So do you feel like a sense of responsibility to, I guess, show the younger generation, show the females that it is physically possible to take on such massive tasks, and ones that I guess haven't been done before, you know, by a female?
Yes, so I will be the youngest female, but also the first. So only three men have done it solo before, and they were 40-ish when they did it. So I've actually really struggled with the media side of things, and with talking to people who, like sponsors, who will go, "Oh, my daughter's about your age, and you know, I told her what you're doing, and she was so amazed by it and everything." Or younger kids and parents will say to me that they hope that their daughters like me, and it's obviously a lovely thing to hear, and they mean absolutely everything good by it, but it's quite a lot of I'm still at university, and it's quite a lot of pressure sometimes to think, oh my goodness, people are actually looking at what I'm doing, and some people actually want to follow. I'm very happy that if I do it, people will then do it maybe after me as well. But I have actually really struggled with the media side of things, because I haven't actually done anything yet either. I haven't gone. You guys have all had amazing careers and everything, but I haven't actually done my row yet. So it can feel a bit undeserved sometimes when people say things like me being an inspiration. So.
Yeah, but I mean, just to even begin the row, I think just shows the kind of determination and courage that you actually have. And for me, I think that is like what you're doing and showing how much courage you have. That is inspiration. Like that is inspiring the next generation, because you're even saying that, you know, you've not done it yet, but it's like, yeah, but even that just kind of proves that, you know, you just have to step in a boat, or you know what I mean? I mean, I'm making it sound easy, but you just have to start your journey. And so I think that's definitely what makes you an inspiration. And is there anything that you feel like you are the first woman, but why? You know what I mean? Like, why do you think that? And how do you think we can get more people to take on such extreme, I mean, but amazing kind of tasks?
So ocean rowing isn't really that old in terms of the races and things, but there were more women doing the ocean row across the Pacific this year than men, which is amazing. Yeah. And there are lots of women that do the race across the Atlantic, but it's just a different route to what I'm doing. It's ocean rowing actually hasn't been around for that long, so that people haven't had a very long time to try and break all of these records, which is why mine is 3, just because I'm just hitting them all off. So I'm sure when I get back, then somebody else will realise that it's actually not that bad of a route, and someone else will do it too. Which would be nice.
Or they might think it's horrendous and think never again. And Sue, I mean, you now obviously you've seen rugby grow, and I would now argue that you're a mentor and an advocate for rugby, females rugby in particular, obviously. So how do you see it growing further, and do we need more female leaders to come on board?
Well, Laura, I think what I'm really pleased and proud of is the work that World Rugby is doing and the work that the unions are doing. And with all the schools work, getting young girls into rugby and creating clear pathways for young girls to play rugby for at whatever, social, or if they have international aspirations. So they are instilling some really good, clear pathways. Secondly, World Rugby is working really hard to bring women back into the game who have retired, like myself. So they're encouraging coaching. They're encouraging refereeing. There are some really good programs to bring women back into the game. So I think, they've started, and the success will be what those numbers look like, what those engagement numbers look like in the future. But we're certainly on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, like I'm just talking about it with you earlier, I just feel like the path that I'm almost a little bit jealous of how fast it's grown. And it's not fast, is it, in your opinion? But compared to like road cycling for us, and don't get me wrong, the journey that road cycling has been on is unbelievable, and we're in such a better place now. But when I stepped in and watched the England Roses play, it was just unbelievable to see them. And
absolutely.
And my little boy, actually, he just played tag rugby. He's only 7. And there were some girls there in the boys team. And it was just fantastic, like just watching them get involved.
I love it. And the benefits for everyone taking part in sport, are just undeniable. And particularly for young girls, and to retain young girls in sport. That's one of the main things we need to achieve, is to keep those young girls in sport. So to keep them interested, well managed, well taught.
What do you think keeps them in sport? Like, what do you think the key factors of keeping females in sport?
Camaraderie, structure, friendships, a community that that they haven't found elsewhere. It's there's so many benefits to playing a team sport, and it's fun. Going down to the club and training with your mates.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Carla, you can touch upon that. And like, do you feel it's important, for these young females to be part of teams? And what does sport give them? Like, because I was in, as much as I was a bike rider, I was actually part of a team sport, and I think it made me the confident person that I am. And I just wish, like, the younger generation of females would see that, and see that it can give you something that sitting in school and like, no offence, like obviously people will go down that route, but sport just gave me something different.
You've hit the nail on the head with confidence. That was probably the one word I'd use, confidence. And I think it gives you social skills from a very young age. And my daughter's 5, but she does Monday football, Tuesday dance, Wednesday swimming, Thursday gymnastics, Friday wherever she wants me to go, and then Saturday stage school. So she is literally around people all the time, doing different sports. And if you met her, you'd be able to tell she's my daughter. She's
Okay.
she's full of confidence already at 5, which is great. But she wasn't like that, I would say, a year or so ago. And I know it's still early days, but it's so important because you learn so much from sport, not just the confidence side, but how to speak to people, how to receive messages. That's massive from an early age, I think. So yeah, look, she's going to end up being a ballerina at this rate. Nothing wrong with that, but I mean, she'll end up being in a solo sport. I can just see it. But no, I think the sports community is like no other. And it brings everybody together, communities together, organisations, brands, everything. And it doesn't matter what you do, sport can bring people together, and I swear by it. It's been my whole life, and hopefully my daughter follows in those footsteps.
And then just to finish, if we just go to each of you, just to touch upon, how, I guess, do you feel we can keep inspiring girls? What do you think like the next step is to keep girls in sport and getting them to the next level? Sue, if we start with you.
Oh gosh, we're already on that journey of getting young girls into sport and hopefully retaining them in sport. But I think it's that whole Red Roses piece about seeing it, being it, the benefits of sport that Carla was just talking about. And also, stats say that if women who participated in sport become leaders and become business leaders, so there's so much that we gain from taking part in sport. So I think just making sure that young girls and women are encouraged through whatever medium they relate to, whatever social media they relate to, through their friends, through the clubs, through the reach out programs, through World Rugby and the unions. So I can't. Rugby literally has made my life, and I now spend all my time giving back.
And Zara, what about you? What do you think? You've come from a sport that has had no females above you. So, what inspired you to carry on? And what do you think we can do to get more females inspired to take on... it's not even take on different challenges. It's just to do things that are maybe outside your comfort zone.
Well, there was a man that did it, so I thought, why can't I? Is the reason that I'm doing it. But... I think as long as you do find it enjoyable and it's your escape. So I luckily quite like rowing, so I don't mind rowing for 20 hours a day, and I actually really enjoy that side of it. But it's about finding a sport that you actually find fun and find an escape from reality because otherwise it's pointless and it looks like something you have to do and you don't enjoy it and you quit when you're 12. Yeah. So just don't give up and keep searching for the sport that you actually like.
And Carla, I guess I'll touch upon the fact that obviously you are a female sports coach. And like I said earlier, there's not that many. So you've literally come through a world where I guess you've had to pave your own way because it's not easy, is it, to step into something that we're so used to seeing males in those roles. So what do you think we can do, to inspire females to be coaches?
1, visibility, which I think we've all touched on, and 2, be prepared to stand up for what you believe. And I would say that's probably what I've done for many years and will continue to do, because we are going to continue to face challenges. That is just life. Us women have to do way more than our counterparts, and we will continue to have to, but it takes us to stand up and for what we believe in and do not back down. So continue to do that, and I will absolutely continue to do that.
Well, thank you 3 very much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed the conversation actually, and I feel like you 3 are absolute inspirations to me. All from different angles, and I think it just shows the importance of female role models and female representation in sport as well, because you guys ultimately are, inspiring the next generation, and I think we all agree how important that is, and we want to see the numbers change. We want to see so many more females getting involved and staying involved in sport. So thank you very much for joining me and sparing some time to talk about it. You've been listening to the Telegraph's Women's Sport podcast with me, Laura Kenny. Produced by Listening Dog Media for the Telegraph. Series producers for the Telegraph are Giles Gear and Sarah Mockford. For more women's sport content from the Telegraph, head to telegraph.co.uk/women's-sport.
MasterCard is proud to sponsor the Telegraph Women's Sport podcast, hosted by Dame Laura Kenny. MasterCard has championed women's sport for over 25 years. Discover more at mastercard.co.uk/impact.